Hi, I'm Rochelle, and you're listening to Box F1 Pod. Today we're debriefing the Brazilian Grand Prix, which might be the best race of the year, to be honest. So many incredible moments throughout the entire weekend. And I got to watch it live because I am in London. So I went to a pub, and there were other people there, and we were all like invested, and it was very exciting. But before I go into a deep dive into the analysis and what it was like to watch live and all that stuff, it's time for the digital warm-up. Do. First of all, I would like to give a quick disclaimer that I am in a hotel, so there is noise around me, and I'm also on a street that has a lot of revving all the time. Not sure why. There's a lot of Ferraris here, so I guess that's a pretty good backdrop for this, but in case you hear some background noise, I apologize. I've replaced my dog barking with Ferraris revving. Alright, so lap 1, F1 news. We had the Las Vegas GP launch event last weekend. Checo, George, Alex, and Lewis were all there. They all did some drives around the strip. They all attended like interviews and all that stuff. The best moment to come out of this was when they were all on stage and George made a sassy comment to Crofty. Crofty started asking a question to Checo, and George interrupted him and said, "Are you allowed to ask Red Bull drivers questions?" And Crofty was like, "Yeah, I've got special permission tonight. Don't start on me." And then he like stammered and was like, Are you allowed to answer?" Directed to Checo. And Checo kind of laughs and goes, "They're not here." And the other presenter goes, "What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas." And everyone just kind of laughed. But it's like one of the, you know how there's that rumor going around on the internet that George is a robot? He's very programmed all the time. So when this banter comes out, unless he's programmed to like occasionally tell a joke, you know, like, "Alexa, tell me a joke. George, tell me a joke." These moments are like confirmation that George is in fact a human being. Also, a quick side note on Mercedes sass. Toto said in an interview that he for sure is going to cheat next year since like Red Bull just got basically a slap on the wrist. Okay, I don't really see how $7 million and wind tunnel time deduction is a slap on the wrist, but fine. Another big moment from the weekend was that Checo did some donuts with no hands, and that circulated everywhere. To be honest, I was hoping to go to Vegas, but I don't see how that's going to happen given it's like, first of all, not even on sale yet, and already tickets and hotels are rumored to be $1,000 each minimum. So unless the Vegas Grand Prix wants to invite me personally to report live, I'm going to be watching Vegas from my home. Also, in other F1 news, Pierre Gasly is, just to reiterate from last week, Pierre Gasly is only 2 points away from a race ban, but both he and other drivers, including George Russell, have spoken out about the need for an exemption to be granted to Pierre, considering the punishment doesn't really fit the crime. Like, Pierre is not an aggressive driver. The things that he's gotten penalty points for really just seem like these dudes are after him. But this exemption, I want to know, is not like a one-off for Pierre, but it's actually like supposed to be the beginning of the stews reapproaching the penalty point rules and making sure for the penalty to fit the action from the drivers, if that makes sense. Also, final note, Mick Schumacher's fate in F1 is still unclear. It has been rumored that Haas has come to a decision, but no announcement has been made as of yet. Although Mick did make a comment about restarting his career, and to be honest, like, it's not difficult to figure out that Haas is not going to take Mick back. Mick is most likely not driving for F1 next year, which is a shame because I know he's a daddy driver, like the ultimate daddy driver, and he like seems like mediocre at best. But he's so wholesome and he's so loved by everyone that you just like can't help but root for him. And what do we know? Maybe he's like in a similar situation to Daniel where the Haas car is just not the right fit for him, and maybe he's got like all this skill and potential that he has yet to be able to demonstrate. So I'm hoping his F1 career isn't over yet. mostly because I just like adore him and hope he has the opportunity for his skills to blossom. And like, look at Nick DeVries. He's made his debut at 27. That's practically like unheard of for a debut. Honestly, the way people talk about Nick debuting in F1 at 27 years old feels exactly the way I feel when my aunt and uncle tell me that at 28 I am now out of time. So I feel like me and Nick are in the same situation. Like, we're both just out here proving the haters wrong. Of course, he has a seat and I don't have a baby, but you know, concept remains the same. Okay, lap 2, off the grid. So, big news this week, Lewis Hamilton became an honorary citizen of Brazil and wore this like fab blue suit. Loved it. There was like a whole ceremony. He received like a medal. It was a whole situation, and I really love that he's loved by Brazil so much. I just love that he has this like random like connection to Brazil. It's great. Um, Also, Daniel has launched Daniel.jpg, inspired by Lando.jpg. His first caption was, "I just started pressing the button," but I've got to say, it is already more entertaining than Lando.jpg. There are tons of photos of the other drivers, like behind the scenes, that are like even making it to his normal grid, and I'm just like loving it. Like all of the like full like zoom in shots of the drivers, and he's like using those pictures to like celebrate the drivers' accomplishments, which is just it's just amazing content. If we had started with Daniel.jpg, I don't know if I would have judged him as much as I judged Lando.jpg, but that just might be. I probably would have judged anything Lando did. Sorry. But speaking of Lando, he's had quite the weekend. On Thursday, Nick DeVries was fitted for Lando's seat because Lando was out with suspected food poisoning. Nick is just like car hopping like nobody's business. Also, by the way, Nick is like growing on me, and I'm not really sure why. Like, why do I like him? Is it because he's an appropriate age? Because he's like such a flirt? Because he's had the most like successful impromptu job interview to job conversion I've ever seen? Not sure, but already obsessed with Nick DeVries, and he hasn't even officially gotten into an F1 car yet. So very excited for next year. But back to Lando and his food poisoning. Coincidentally, I was actually going to comment on the fact that Lando filmed a promotional video with Hilton where he helped their chef make an egg royale, and the video is basically just him like fucking up and the chef laughing and rolling his eyes, and at the end the chef goes, "Would you even eat that?" Clearly meaning like this could be better. And Lando goes, "No, I'm allergic to fish," which is funny because I'm pretty sure it's just like categorically untrue. We've seen Lando's like hatred towards fish over the years, and so I guess he's basically just rebranding his hatred into an allergy, which is fine, but was like, I was truly going to comment how Lando's palate is probably not as developed or mature as I thought it was or hoped it was, but this food poisoning is clearly just going to be a massive setback. Like, who knows like how long it's going to take him to get back on his culinary journey. Like, he was making such great progress. But he still hates fish and whatever gave him food poisoning. So I guess we're just going to stick to plain burgers and milk in the meantime. I did enjoy him reposting a meme of himself where it's like that picture of him with the sad face after one of his races that went bad, and it just says, "When you can't enjoy your birthday cake due to that damn food poisoning," and he reshared it and just wrote sad. Which it is, but that brings me to my next Lando content. Sunday was Lando's birthday. He turned 23 because he's still a baby. He got a lot of happy birthday wishes, including from Carlos and Zed, the DJ. Daniel recorded a nice video message for him via McLaren where he said stuff along the lines of like, "Happy birthday, you haven't had many of them." that Daniel was going to get him a nice present, which I personally hope is going to be Daniel's merch. And Daniel finished the video with a little happy birthday, little buddy, which Lando is so small. I think they have like a decade between them. Also, Lando's cake was a tire with his helmet on top of it and some golf balls on the side. And like my main questions are like, why no DJ equipment? Why not a camera? Like, doesn't McLaren know that Lando is so much more than golf and cars? Like, he's a photographer, a DJ, a foodie. And for anyone concerned, Lando did make it back to the track the next day and captioned his return with, "Can't get rid of me that easy." Who's he talking to? The fish that gave him food poisoning, the us, like who? Nick? Who's he talking to? To be honest, participating in the race though was probably a mistake on Lando's part. He could have avoided the birthday curse and gotten more points for the team if Nick drove. But Lando opted to participate, so we'll just have to deal with the consequences of that decision. I also wanted to talk about how there's been a lot of driver mingling of late, like unexpected driver mingling, and you know I love driver mingling. First, Lando.jpg posted a picture of him and of Lando and Carlos out to dinner, which we all know they mingle, but like seeing it is nice. Guan Yu posted a picture of him and Valtteri out for a beer, plus like an emoji covering up a mysterious item in Valtteri's hand, and I'm dying to know what it could be. Is it like joints? Is it a gun? Like, what is Valtteri holding in his hands that's so illicit that it had to be blocked by an emoji? Also, during the driver's parade, Yuki drove Alonso around and Mick drove Seb around, which is very wholesome, but like, what is F1 going for here? Like, driving Miss Daisy? Like, why are the elderly being chauffeured by the youth? You know? Also, some non-driver mingling that I enjoyed included Daniel talking about Seb. He said that Seb's picked up the phone multiple times this year and just been a friend and just like showing care and just checking in as a true friend would do. And it's just subtle Seb strikes again. Like, what are we gonna do without him? I actually don't know what we're gonna do without Seb or Daniel, but Seb. Everything Seb does is just so pure. You know, he there was a picture that went around of him at the airport. He like it looked like he was traveling coach. Everyone else is in a private jet, and Seb is traveling coach. To be fair, he looks so normal with his like dirty hair and headband that no one would suspect that that's Seb. But I just can't with like he's really walking the walk, you know. Love Seb. Love him. Also, Daniel Ricciardo hung out with Scotty James, and for those of you who don't know, Scotty James is a 4-time Olympian snowboarder, and he's also a Red Bull athlete, and he's Australian. So he and Daniel have been friends for a while, but what's so interesting about Scotty James and Daniel hanging out is that Scotty James is engaged to Chloe Stroll. Yes, that Stroll. She is Lance's sister, Lawrence's daughter. So, like, even though Daniel has probably been friends with Scotty for ages, I find it's so entertaining to imagine the conversation he would have with Lance when he gets back to the paddock. Like, oh, hey, Lance, how was your week? Oh, yeah, mine was really good. Just hung out with your sister. Weird. Also, Chloe Stroll is like the best life. Follow her on Instagram. You will see she just like is living up the dream. Just eating good food, traveling wherever. Like, Chloe's living the life. Okay, lap 3. Outfit of the day. First up is Seb's shirt. He's wearing like, I don't even know how to explain this. It's like a tree that looks more like broccoli, and the Brazilian flag is on it. It's got like the yellow diamond and the blue circle, and the tree goes down, and then underneath it's like the German flag as the roots. And I understand he's going from some sort of like Brazil, Germany environment thing. But really, it looks like the giving tree turned into a piece of broccoli and just became evil. Like the shirt looks kind of evil. But I appreciate what he was going for. Maybe not my favorite design as far as Seb's shirts go, but appreciate the sentiment behind it. Also, Nick de Vries wore a Nacional cap in honor of Senna, and yes, I am now including Nick de Vries in these roundups because I love him. Also, in a recent interview with Yuki and Pierre for the AlphaTauri London store launch, Pierre mentioned how Yuki's fashion has really flourished. And I went through, and I can't say Yuki has ever dressed bad, but perhaps he's like gotten bolder with color and pattern, which I think is what Pierre had meant. But I would also like to say that anyone forced to wear AlphaTauri at all times is really limited in terms of being able to unleash their full fashionista. Like, Pierre succeeds on occasion. He's got that it factor, but anyone who can only wear AlphaTauri stuff is unfortunately not got much to work with. Also, I walked past that store the other day, literally like 5 days after Pierre and Yuki were there, and it's right next to Harrods, which is a prime real estate location. And I really wanted to go in, but there was literally no one in there except the store people who were just standing around and staring at the door, and I was way too intimidated because I'm not going to buy AlphaTauri stuff, but I will try again before I leave London, and hopefully when there's more people in the store so no one pays attention to me. Okay, the big fashion moment from this weekend, and it's big because it's a conspiracy theory, and y'all know how I feel about conspiracy theories. So Charles arrived to the paddock on Thursday wearing a Ferrari t-shirt, not like his red one, but like the Ferrari style one, you know, where it says Ferrari in giant letters and it's like the black oversized. So he wore that. Friday, remember, was qualifying when the tire situation happened. So on Saturday, he showed up to the paddock wearing Brunello Cucinelli. No Ferrari merch in sight. Sunday, he showed up wearing a Burberry t-shirt. So the internet conspiracy is that this is how he's showing his frustration with Ferrari. And it's by not wearing Ferrari merch, which I find hilarious. You know, I'm like always a big fan of fashion being a vehicle for expressing how you feel. And I am going to side with the internet and just make a vast assumption that Charles is telling us how he feels about his team by not wearing Ferrari merch. Anyway, that concludes our digital warm-up. On to the race rhyme. Welcome to the 2022 GP in Brazil. Who's ready for a weekend that's super chill? JK, the weekend was thrilling from beginning to end. And don't forget we've got quali sprints and a race to go full send. Ferrari messes up Charles' tire choice because their strategy is out of control, and Haas looks like fucking legends because Kevin is on pole. During the sprint, Fernando and Esteban get into a catfight, while George sends it to first much to everyone's delight. With Mercedes locking out the front row, it's like a 2021 TBT. Can they make it through the race without any unnecessary debris? Nope. Lap 1, Daniel and Kevin hit each other and are out of the race. Poor Kev went from pole to DNF real quick, and it wasn't even his mistake. At the restart, Max is all like, look at me, I can overtake Lewis with no hands, see? Then Max and Lewis collide. Anyone else getting deja vu? Stu rules Max responsible, even though it could be ruled a racing incident too. And then Lando hits Charles, sending him into the wall. How much bad luck can on one person befall? But Charles perseveres, and from the wall to P4 he goes. And then some inter-team civil wars are exposed. Checo's all like, let me through, and Max is all like, haha, Nabu. Then Charles is like, put me first, remember the championship? But Ferrari is all like, we've got only plans A through Z, and none of them include a championship. George Russell leaps like a gazelle to his first race win. Yay! It's also wholesome, including the Toto Wolff FaceTime, which made us all feel some type of way. But I've still got questions, quite a lot. One, is Mercedes back on top? And did Max cockblock Checo as payback for Monaco or not? And have we entered Checo's reputation era? Because then 2023 soundtrack is on lock. Next week is Abu Dhabi and the end of F1 2022. Here's hoping more wholesome moments and drama will ensue. Okay, On to analysis. So, I did say at the beginning that I watched the race at a pub, which was very exciting, but I think I need to give a disclaimer that only the first hour was with the sound on. The second hour, the race was muted because there was a pub quiz going on. Plus, the TV was so far away from me that I could see, very little of the text. So, it was a struggle. Also, none of my subscriptions work in the UK, so I couldn't watch from the hotel, and I couldn't do any rewatches the next day besides, whatever clips I could scrounge up. So apologies in advance if this isn't as nuanced as it could be, or it usually is. As a side note, I do have to say I'm a bit disappointed by the lack of accessibility to F1 in the UK. I was also kind of disappointed by the turnout. I was kind of expecting it to be like football, but it wasn't. There were 3 other people at the pub watching the race. There were a pair of French boys sat in front of me and a McLaren fan up at the bar. Wasn't a great day for him, to be fair. But anyways, it was really fun to watch with other people's reactions in real time. Also, there was a funny moment. The first question of the pub quiz was who won the F1 World Championship in 2022, and the 4 of us all looked at each other and lolled while everyone else doing the quiz started frantically looking up at the screen trying to see who was leading the race. Pretty sure a lot of them put George Russell. But anyways, I got off topic. Now that I've made my little disclaimer, let's get on to the race. And holy shit, what a race it was. First of all, it was a sprint weekend, which means quali was on Friday instead of Thursday. And during quali, the conditions were kind of damp, but not damp. And so one of the craziest moments from quali was that Charles got fucked by Ferrari again. At the beginning of Q3, Charles was the only one to start on intermediate tires, only to be pitted to change to softs, because obviously intermediates weren't working. It wasn't wet. When he was pitted to change his tires for the first time to intermediates, it kind of seemed like they were making it up as they went. It literally looked like they were standing around discussing it while Charles was just sitting there with 3 tires on huh? The commentators described it as showing up to a black tie affair but not checking the dress code in advance, because eventually they had to pit him again to change into softs because the intermediates obviously weren't working. But unfortunately, that pit stop came too late because George, by that point, George had spun out and was beached in the gravel, which it was a really weird spin out, by the way. He backed into the wall and then tried to correct, but ended up doing a donut in the gravel, but not on purpose. Anyway, quali was red flagged with 8 minutes to go. And then the session was never restarted again. And on the radio, Charles was basically did everyone complete a lap? And they were yeah. And he was nice, beautiful, fuck. So really bad day for Charles. But by some miracle, Kevin Magnussen was leading. He also had no idea. So as he was returning to the pit, he gets on the radio and is all what position are we? And they go, well, you're P1. And he's huh? And he pulls him to the garage, and it's just everything. Everyone was losing their minds, cheering and celebrating. He's shaking the car. He's losing his mind. There's a picture of him behind the helmet, cross-eyed. So good. And it's Haas's first ever pole. And Gene Haas's birthday was that Saturday, which was quite the present to receive for your 70th birthday. Also, when Gunther walked out on track, there was this deafening roar that the crowd gave when they saw him, and it was just everything. Also, the best quote from Gunther Steiner regarding their pole was, "When it rains soup, you need to have a spoon, and we had a spoon ready today." I have never heard that phrase in my life. But Kevin couldn't believe it. Every step of the way, he's just what the fuck is happening? There's a video of him taking that picture with the top 3, and it was him, Max, and George, and it was just hilarious because literally in the video you could hear him going, what's happening right now? Also, one of my favorite parts is how happy all the other drivers are for Kevin. Almost every single person posted. Daniel did a whole ass grid post. Max, George, Pierre, Esteban, Carlos all congratulated him. Pierre's post was my favorite. He posted a picture of Kevin with the goat emoji over his face. Pierre also liked Kevin's dad's tweet celebrating his son's pole position, which is just such a Pierre move. But anyway, overall it was a great moment for everyone involved. However, it's kind of a bittersweet moment because he's only on pole for the sprint race, which is not I guess necessarily the same as starting the race in pole. Not that I think he cared or anyone really cared. but it's just kind of like not the same because he didn't actually start the race on pole. Also, it was kind of hard on people taking penalties. Like Carlos, who had an engine change penalty incoming for the weekend, probably really wanted to apply for the sprint rather than the actual race, but he wasn't allowed to take it for the sprint. You can only apply penalties to the race. So there's definitely pros and cons, but for sure the biggest pro that we learned this weekend was 100% the Brazil track makes for an epic sprint race. So going into the sprint, the order is Kevin in P1, followed by Max, George, Lando, Carlos, Esteban, Fernando, Lewis, Checo, Charles. It's top 10. So, onto the sprint race, which did not disappoint. There were 3 major moments during the sprint race. One was Esteban and Fernando. First of all, the drama between these two, just in 24 laps, is wild. They had contact in turn 4, where Esteban pushed Fernando off track, and then they had more contact down the straight, which forced Fernando to pit due to damage to the car. This was the more controversial incident, I suppose, since it seemed like Fernando braked too late when trying to overtake Esteban, but it also kind of seemed like Esteban was driving slower and didn't react to Fernando's overtake in time. Despite both of these altercations and the damage that incurred, Fernando finished ahead of Esteban in P15. However, Stu found Fernando 100% responsible for the second incident down the straight and gave him 2 penalty points and a 5-second penalty, which pushed him down to P18. One spot behind Esteban, who was in P17. Fernando was not happy. On the radio, he said, "First you pushed me on turn 4 and now on the straight." And after the race, when he was asked about it, he basically shrugged his shoulders and said, "One more race and it's over finally." Alpine, on their end, condemned the behavior of both drivers and said that it was completely inappropriate from both of them. They also released a statement supposedly regarding the negative comments on social from fans. They wrote, "Whatever happens on track, there is absolutely no excuse for hateful comments, abuse, or toxicity to be directed towards our drivers, team members, fans, or indeed anybody online. Of all the comments that we received across our social media channels during and after today's sprint qualifying, we received 882 toxic comments, 162 of which were severely toxic. This is wholly unacceptable. What we have seen today is unfortunately not an isolated incident. We continue to see hate and discrimination online, and as a team, we will not tolerate this. We will take actions against individuals or groups who produce or disseminate social media posts that contain or encourage online abuse of our drivers, team members, and fans." So the obvious question, I think, from this statement is who had to sit and count the comments, and what is the scale that determines what is a toxic comment and what is severely toxic? Anyways, in terms of whose side I'm on, it's hard for me to pick because Fernando obviously is known for his bad attitude and for leaving teams on poor terms and for like being aggressive and moody, etc. But Esteban Loki has issues with everyone. He comes off like all jovial and harmless and like this like gangly little kid, but like I really don't think he is. So in terms of the actual Esteban, I think Esteban was in the wrong for both of them. And classic FIA obviously punished Fernando after the race, obviously. That's how they always do it. But in terms of who's the biggest twerp, like in general, I'm not sure. But I do think we'll definitely see the claws come out next year with Esteban and Pierre. That's going to be difficult. All right, so the other big thing during the sprint race was all the overtakes that happened to Max. Not Max overtaking people, but Max being overtaken. So even though he had gained the lead by lap 3, like he overtook Kevin and kept the lead, he wasn't able to hold on to it for that long. About halfway through, George is basically wheel to wheel with Max, fighting for the overtake, and comes really close several times. And after 3 tries, he finally succeeds in a really, really great move and gains the lead pretty significantly. And then Carlos overtakes Max a few laps later. There is contact between them. There's a bit of damage to Max's end plate, but he keeps on going. So even though Carlos has overtaken Max, he ends up side by side with Max and Lewis for a couple of turns, which looks really cool. But Carlos ends up pulling ahead, which leaves Max and Lewis side by side. But a few laps later, Lewis overtakes Max into P4, which really just goes to show that Red Bull did not have the pace this weekend. Don't know why, but they just didn't. And it's like such a stark contrast to the other races this year. And then the other big moment was between Checo and Max. So, like, with a couple laps left of the sprint, Checo is behind Max, but not, like, right behind him. I don't think he was even within DRS range. But he still gets on the radio and says, will I get his position or no? The answer is no, which I think is frustrating for Checo, but I also think it was fair for Red Bull not to give it to Checo because it would basically require asking Max to stop on the track to let him through, which doesn't make any sense. So as frustrated as I am on Checo's behalf, I don't think it makes sense from a strategic perspective. So the final results are George in P1, followed by Lewis, Max, Checo, Charles, Lando, Carlos, Kevin, Seb, Gasly, Daniel, Mick, Guan Yu, Valtteri, Yuki, Lance, Esteban, Fernando, Nikki, and Alex. So Alex DNF'd. He had an issue with his car. Mick started P20 and ended P12, so he made up 8 positions in like a wild sprint of like overtakes. Also, Carlos finished P3, but he will start the race in P7 because of his engine penalty. And Pierre finished P10, but then he was summoned to stew for failing to follow direct instructions and driving unnecessarily slowly behind the safety car. But this is so dumb. Luckily, Gasly was able to avoid penalty points during this race, which probably is because I was wearing my Pierre Gasly shirt specifically for this exact situation, i.e. not getting penalty points. So you're welcome, Pierre. All right. Can't believe we're only now getting to the race, but let's get into Sunday. So the start. First, it's a great start. George zooms ahead. Lewis also gets a good start, but not as good as George, who nearly flies down, like, away down the track. Behind them, Max is managing to keep Checo at bay, but just. And behind them, Lando has managed to overtake Charles at the start and puts Lando into P4, which is looking good for Orlando, but it is his birthday, and we all know what that means. It's not looking good for him for long. All right, next is the Kevin versus Daniel incident. So just moments into the first lap, there's an incident between Kevin and Daniel. Daniel accidentally taps Kevin. The tap sends Kevin freewheeling across the track, and Daniel, who saw Kevin spin but didn't really see the spin reverse, because then Kevin started spinning backwards, Kevin spun into Daniel, and they both went off track and were both out of the race. The aftermath of them on the track was kind of wholesome despite what was happening. Kevin hopped out and immediately went to Daniel, and they both talked to the marshals. After that, things got kind of weird because we got a shot of Daniel in the paddock, but we also got a shot of Kevin still on track, like just leaning against the barriers watching shit happen. This was like a big thing. There was a lot of lone drivers on the side of the track today. But why did Daniel get a ride and Kevin did not? Also, after that shot, it was like Kevin was nowhere to be found. No clue where he went. Was he still on track the whole time? Like, what happened to him? Also, like, a final comment on this. I've never seen karma play out, like, so swiftly before, just, like, right in front of our eyes. Daniel tapped Kevin, and then Kevin took him out. They were both out. It's just wild. But Daniel was given a 3-place grid penalty for Abu Dhabi and 2 penalty points for the incident with Kevin, which it was his fault. But again, it's not necessarily consistent with all of the other rulings the FIA has given, which is just like, when will they be consistent? So at the restart, obviously the situation called for a yellow flag and then a safety car, but at the restart there was like a lot of nervous energy about how George would handle it. Would he overshoot and go too fast? Would he not go fast enough? But George had like the perfect restart. Behind him though, Checo is inching towards Max to attempt an overtake, but Max was closing in on Lewis and lunges forward. So as Checo's attempting that overtake on Max, Max is attempting an overtake on Lewis. So Max goes round the outside. Max and Lewis hit each other. Lewis goes off track. Debris is flying everywhere, but both are luckily able to rejoin the race. Now, Lewis gets on the radio and says, "That was no racing incident, man." Max, for his part, says he wasn't left enough space. Both have to come in for a pit stop. Lewis comes out P8. Max comes out P17. He had a front wing change. But it seems that Stu agreed with Lewis and gave Max a 5-second penalty. And I don't know. I really don't want to come off as a Max sympathizer, but the move was, like, without a doubt aggressive. And perhaps unnecessary, particularly in that moment. But I don't think it was Max's fault. I think Lewis is just as much to blame. I think they're both to blame. I think Lewis could have retained position without cutting Max completely off. So basically, I think that makes it a racing incident. But Max got penalized, and obviously this has caused a huge debate online. Like, is Max an asshole? Is Max too aggressive? Is Max's driving different with Lewis? Did Max do it on purpose? Like, basically, in conclusion, I think it's fair to say they both race differently with each other than they do with other people. Anyway, so the next incident is between Charles and Lando. Like, a couple minutes later, literally during the same lap, Charles and Lando collide. Lando literally drives into Charles. Charles ends up in the wall, has to pit, but he's able to rejoin the race in P18. As Charles was, like, trying to reverse from the wall, his radio was... his engineer goes, "You okay?" And Charles goes, "He's a dick." Stu agreed. Lando got a 5-second penalty for causing the incident. Interestingly, he was found completely at fault for the incident, but Max was found predominantly at fault. Regardless, they got the same punishment, which was a 5-second penalty and 2 penalty points. How does an incident where someone is somewhat at fault and an incident where someone is completely at fault result in the same punishment? Also, when this happened, I cannot even relay the, like, audible groan within the pub that was, like, somewhere between, "Oh no, Charles," and of course it's Charles, and, like, just, like, depressed laughter at Charles's continued misfortune. Like, it was the exact same reaction, because I think we all feel the same way. Like, you're so unlucky, man. Anyway, in another dose of karma, the next yellow flag / virtual safety car came about lap 52 towards the end of the race when Lando's car just died. He was able to pull over safely to the side before getting out, and we got another shot of, like, a lone driver on the side of the track. He's sitting down, like, on this little stump or, like, a tire or something, and is just watching everything go by. Birthday curse, man. That's just, like, what happens. What was hilarious, though, is the McLaren fan at the pub just yelled, "Fuck," over the entire bar, and the 2 French boys in front of me just burst out laughing, like, pointing at him. Poor guy. Okay, so let's talk about team order controversies, and there were quite a few, actually. First up, the more mild one was the Fernando and Esteban situation. Obviously, they got quite a stern talking to yesterday. Like, Otmar mentioned it in post-sprint interviews that the team was super disappointed in their behavior, and you could tell that they were on better behavior today, but that really didn't stop Esteban from giving some sass to his engineer. Basically, at one point, his engineer gets on the radio and says Fernando has a tire advantage. Let's not focus on him right now. Let's concentrate on beating Vettel eventually. Let's let him through nice and cleanly. If you can confirm that, please. Esteban replies, "Let me race, and maybe once the situation settles down, I'll let him through." And the engineer goes full dad mode, and he's like, "Esteban, I don't want you fighting Fernando. Is that understood?" To which Esteban reluctantly replies, "I need to fight Vettel." Like, confirming what the engineer needed him to confirm without saying it out loud. And to be fair, Esteban did do what he was asked. He passed Vettel and then let Fernando overtake him. But the tone and the sass and the, like, avoiding, like, saying what he was actually supposed to do, he's just peak tween behavior. Not that Fernando's any better, by the way. They're both acting like little brats. But the tone that his engineer took was actually hilarious. Like, the kid, he clearly has children, right? You could tell that the guy has kids because the way he spoke to Esteban was how you speak to a 4-year-old. The second situation with team orders was Charles and Carlos. So towards the end, Charles was in P4 and Carlos was in P3. And Charles was gaining on Carlos, but not really. He was like 3 seconds behind Carlos, maybe 4. But he started getting on the radio and saying, "Are we switching?" Basically. He kept repeating, "Please think about the championship. Every point. Think about the championship. Don't forget about the championship." He did it like 3 times. The engineer said that it was too risky. And they didn't initiate the team order. And at the end, his engineer goes like, great job, Charles. Like, you fought really well, like great drive, and there are reasons why we didn't initiate team orders, but we'll talk about it later. And Charles literally goes, I don't know what reason you are speaking about, but whatever, it's fine. I think it's worth noting, particularly when we think about the next situation we're going to talk about, that Carlos was never told to let Charles pass. He said in a post-race interview that no information came to me to let Charles by, so I think the team was managing it. But I'm a big team player. Whatever would have come, I would have done. I'm glad he finished in front of Perez. Which, first of all, round of applause for Carlos. To be fair, if he actually did have to give up his position, he probably would have had a less measured response. But the reason that Charles, and I see a lot of people, by the way, like complaining about how dare Charles make such a demand, like, especially for a podium position, right? Like, it's not just any old position, it's podium position. Like, it's so rude and demanding of him for them to force Carlos to give him that spot. But Charles later said, and Carlos, but also confirmed, that they had actually agreed to this before the race. He didn't just ask for no reason, and that's, like, true, by the way. He's never done this before, so, and we know it's, like, out of character for him, so, like, to hear him begging was weird, because that's not very Charles, and Charles and Carlos don't really have that sort of those sort of conversations. Like, we expect it from Red Bull, we expected it last year from Mercedes, but, like, we never really hear that there. They're both pretty equal. So it totally makes sense that they had discussed it beforehand. And it also, like, it's a team thing. Like, Charles's qualms are with the team. It's their strategy calls and their weird promises, evidently, and, like, stuff that's happening behind the scenes that doesn't translate on track. That's, like, really fucking with Charles, I think. And he's losing it. Like, you can tell dude is on his, like, it's a good thing there's only one race left, because I don't think Charles has the mental capacity to handle any more races with Ferrari. He needs a break. Okay, so now the most controversial team orders situation of all is Checo and Max. We already had an incident with them during the sprint race when Checo asked to get ahead of Max and wasn't allowed. Before the race, Christian said that if Checo wanted Max's position, he'd have to overtake. But during the race, that changed. So Max overtook Checo in lap 67 on merit. But then both Checo and Max got told that if Max is unable to overtake Fernando, he will have to give the position to Checo. Once it became clear that Max could not overtake Fernando, his engineer gets on and tells him to let Checo pass. This conversation is tragic. So his engineer goes, "Don't worry about DRS. Let Checo through." Silence. Again, let Checo through. Silence. Again, "Max, let Checo through, please." Silence. Max didn't respond to any of these. Eventually, his engineer says, "Max, what happened?" And Max says, "I told you already last time. Don't ask me that again. Are we clear about that? I gave my reasons and I stand by it." Max doubles down with this attitude after the race, saying he stands by his reasons. He did what he thinks is right. But he also said that if Checo needs his help in Abu Dhabi, he will help him. We'll see if that's true. As for what was happening on Checo's side of things, he had some interesting radio and interviews. He asked several times if he was going to be able to pass. He keeps getting told that he will. And then he obviously couldn't pass. And his engineer is kind of, like, apologetic. And Checo says it shows who he really is, which is, like, burn. And we obviously know that we shouldn't hold the drivers accountable for what they say mid-race, like, with all the adrenaline rushing, but still, that's quite a burn, like a deep one. After the race, he also said that after all I've done for him, it's a bit disappointing, to be honest. I'm really surprised. Okay. He also said that if Max has 2 world championships, it's because of him. First of all, if. Second of all, this is, like, a bit much. While, like, you could definitely argue that Checo helped Max get the title last year. Like, he did a lot for him. This year, besides that one weird call, like, towards the beginning when they made Checo give up his position, remember when he was like, "That's not fair, but okay." Max won this championship on his own. Like, Checo didn't really help him with anything. So this was a lot of drama. There's a lot of, like, harsh words from Checo, to be fair, in response to a very harsh attitude from Max. But Christian said that at the end of the race, both drivers have spoken, shaken hands, and they're moving on. We keep hearing about these reasons. No one really knows what these reasons are. But my absolute favorite theory that's circulating right now is that Max's actual reason for doing this today is because Checo intentionally crashed in Monaco. He apparently admitted this to Christian and Dr. Helmut Marko. And if you remember his crash, it was during qualifying, and it was near the end, which meant that Max couldn't complete his flying lap and was forced to start the race P4. That is also the race that Checo went on to win. And if this is the reason that Max behaved the way he did today, basically cock-blocked Checo from P2, that would mean that this was payback 6 months in the making. We're like, I guess, until Checo would need Max's help. And if that's true, then Max is diabolical. But this also lines up with Max saying that he would help Checo in Abu Dhabi and that they've shaken hands and moving on, because that means that it kind of sounds like he feels like they're even now, which is like so weird that these are equal. Weird that he would care 6 months later. Weird that it matters when he's won every championship possible. But I'm kind of obsessed with this theory, and I must know the answer because this is a wild payback plan. Wowza. Anyways, back to the team order controversies, like, in general. Both situations were unfortunate, but also neither is, like, super clear cut. Like, neither Charles nor Checo were that close to Carlos and Max, respectively. But the key difference in the situations is that Charles seems to have been let down by his team, whereas Checo was let down by his teammate. So, like, different situations, both probably equally frustrating for the respective drivers and for the viewer. Like, I'm rooting for Charles and Checo both to get second. I can't pick. But I guess it also goes to show how important second place in the championship is for both Checo and Charles, which I guess most people would think it doesn't matter at this point, but they really care, and I think it's good that they care. By the way, just a little peek behind the scenes. I really struggle when I'm typing out notes regarding Charles, Checo, and Carlos, especially when it's like one after the other. So whichever name I type first, I just accidentally keep typing over and over. So at one point my notes said Charles nor Charles were that close to Charles and Max. It's very confusing. Okay, so a bit about the post-race. Like I mentioned, I was watching the second half of the race on silent, so I couldn't actually hear what was being said or whatever. And when Lewis was giving his post-race interview, I was texting my friend what I assumed he was saying. And then I watched the clip of what he actually said, and I was almost word for word. So I'm going to read you what I sent to my friend, and then I'm going to play you the clip of what Lewis actually said. So grateful, so happy for George, for the team, both here and back at the factory. The Max incident was unfortunate, but he persevered, and the FIA acted appropriately. But in conclusion,
well, firstly, I gotta say huge congratulations to George. What an amazing drive he did today. He did amazing qualifying yesterday, so he truly deserves it. To my team, so proud of everyone back at the factory. And here, this is an incredible result. We've worked so hard through this year to get a 1-2, or to get a win, and so this is hugely deserved from everybody. So big thank you. What can I say? You know how it is with Max. So muito obrigado. Big thank you to everyone here in Brazil. I've really had one of the best weeks of my life here, just with how everyone's accepted me here and the warm welcome I've had. So. Yeah, excited to come back here again, and hopefully some holidays in future. Thank you.
It was pretty spot on. Also, Another Lewis moment was when they're on the podium and they're all posing for the picture. Everyone's standing there smiling like they're normal people, and Lewis does like his wave that he always does on the podium, like at the crowd. And his wave looks like he was personally trained by the Queen of Genovia. Like, it's such a thank you for being here today wave. Like, chill, Lewis. Also, a great post-race interview moment is throughout the media pen and through the post-race show and wherever Carlos is, he's like standing next to the interviewer, theoretically answering the questions the interviewer is asking him, but he's staring at screens the entire time, whether behind the interviewer, to the side, behind him, watching replay after replay after replay. Carlos has no chill. Like, he can't just relax, enjoy third place. No, he has to be analyzing, constantly analyzing. He's watching. He's barely answering these questions. He looks so serious. I don't think he smiled once. He did actually smile once in the post-race press conference when George was asked how he's going to celebrate. He said that he's on the same flight to Abu Dhabi with Carlos, and it's a 15-hour flight, so they'll probably do something on the flight. And Carlos said, I told him that drinks are on me. And George said, I think they're free on the flight, aren't they? And Carlos said, that's why they're on me. Good one, Carlos. But honestly, the best part of all post-race stuff was Georgie. I genuinely started tearing up. Pretty sure the McLaren fan was wiping tears as well. All four of us started clapping for George, and the pub quizzes were like, huh? It was so wholesome. His radio, his interview, his little sitting on the side and wiping tears away. The shout out to Carmen in his interview. The FaceTime with Toto. That was my favorite. The little FaceTime when he pointed the phone to the camera and it's just Toto and his glasses. So cute. My one critique is Sky's decision to replay George jumping out of his car over and over and over again. He looks like a leaping gazelle. And just like in general, if you're going to play slow motion videos of George in motion, it needs to be more upper body, because when it involves, he's just so much leg. And the more leg that's involved in slow-mo, the more funny it looks. So him leaping off the car, leaping into the team's arms, just a lot of leg. So the final results are George in P1, followed by Lewis, Carlos, Charles, Fernando, Max, Checo, Esteban, Valtteri, and Lance. So driver of the day is officially Lewis. And while I don't want to take away from his performance today, he started P2, got into an incident, fought his way back from P8 to P2, still finishing second. That's a really great performance. But there were some exceptional performances today. Just to name a few, George led the race for almost the entire time, driving impeccably despite people trying to catch up to him, despite incident after incident. He kept his cool and drove a great race. Fernando, who made up 13 places from P18 to P5. Esteban, who went from P17 to P8. Carlos, who started P7 and fought his way to a podium position. Charles, who started P6, ended up in the wall, was forced back to P18, and then fought his way all the way back up to P4 in just the second half of the race. That's incredible. So if I were going to pick, it'd probably be Charles or Fernando. But there were just a lot of great options today. Okay, dig in the box. I'm going to have to say Max. No matter how many excuses I'm able to conjure up, none of them actually defend his actions. He was wildly aggressive on track today and it backfired. He was super messy and practically launched a civil war within Red Bull. His reasons are TBD, but potentially it's payback for something that happened 6 months ago and didn't actually affect his drivers or constructors championship. His method of retaliation was to cock-block his teammate from second place in the championship. It's diabolical. If I were to give a soundtrack to Max's season, now that this information has come out, it would be Mastermind by Taylor Swift. Just crazy. But it's totally thrilling and totally exciting, and I live for it. I do. But in the end, Max was a douchebag today. Sorry. So with the standings, the most important thing to take away is that Charles and Checo are now tied for second place with 290 points each. So Abu Dhabi will be the decider. And again, there's still like constructor championship fight between Ferrari and Mercedes, between AlphaTauri and Haas. Lots of little fights here and there that will be decided in a week's time. Anyways, that's it for the Brazilian Grand Prix, and what a race. Honestly, not sure anything can top this weekend. Abu Dhabi has big shoes to fill. I will still be in London next week, so my viewing situation is probably going to be the same. I'm really sorry I don't have access to all my usual resources, but hopefully it went okay anyway. The question I most look forward to having answered is what Max's reasons were for not letting Checo pass, because he kept repeating he's got his reasons, and I really need to know what it was. We'll probably never find out, but I really want to know. As always, please like, subscribe, review, and share with any potential boxes. See you next week. Box.